Good evening. Welcome to the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting of November 29th, 2021. Mrs. Bonifield, would you please take the roll for us this evening?
Mrs. Acosta? Here. Mrs. Bonifield is here. Mr. Centers?
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Bradford isn't with us this evening, and President Burton.
Here, and we have a quorum. Mrs. Bonifield, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
I would love to.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to everybody who is in attendance with us this evening, as well as those who are watching from home. A couple of quick housekeeping items this evening. We have audience communication this evening, and it looks like we have just 2 or 3 beyond what would take our normal 15-minute time period. Are all board members in agreement that we can go ahead and take all of those at the regular time as opposed to pushing any to the end?
Yeah.
Okay, seeing agreement on that issue since it's not going to take us too much longer than our normal time slot. The other item, if you are coming in this evening, if you'd like an agenda, they can be found just outside the door. If you pulled an agenda earlier today off of the website, it had one switch just in the order of items. Board members, are we all in agreement that we can reverse the order of response to prior audience communications and audience communications, thereby hearing our response first? And the reason is that some of our items we've been hearing about at audience communications, we do have response, and that might answer questions that people have this evening. So is it acceptable to all board members that we hear our response first and then any additional audience communication members who would like to participate? Okay, seeing agreement on that. Again, if you'd like an agenda this evening, they can be found just outside the door to my left. If you're at home and you'd like an agenda to follow along with, you can find them on our website. That is livoniapublicschools.org. If you hover over the board tab, you can drop down to board meeting information, and you can find agendas for this evening there. You can also find the video for any of our prior meetings if you're interested in seeing any of those meetings. This evening's meeting is a regular meeting, and by that, some folks might refer to it as a voting meeting. What we mean by that is the items coming before the board this evening have been discussed at typically at least 2, if not more, prior meetings. So what we're looking at doing this evening is voting on items that we've had extensive conversation in the past regarding. If you're looking for in-depth discussion for the items that are coming before the board, I do suggest that you either tune into the Committee of the Whole meetings or watch them online at your leisure. That's where we really do a lot of deep discussion about the items that come before the board for a vote. So you may see less conversation than you would typically expect at a meeting, a voting meeting. Please understand that that's not because we have not discussed these meetings at length, but rather it's because we've done it at previous meetings, so there are fewer questions this evening. One item that the Board of Education holds very near and dear to our heart is the teaching of respect to our students in our classrooms. That starts at this board table. You have the commitment of this Board of Education that we will treat one another and everybody who comes before the board with respect. In return, we do ask that everybody treats each other with respect who's in attendance this evening. We may agree or disagree on issues, but we find it of utmost importance to treat one another with respect and to teach our children by that example. The next item on our agenda this evening is item 3, communications, and 3A is the American Education Week. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Acosta.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District designate November 15th through the 19th, 2021 as the 100th annual observance of American Education Week.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Costa, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mrs. Jenkins.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, President Burton, members of the board, Superintendent Elquist. Each year, our district, like those across the U.S., recognizes American Education Week, which was designated for this year on the week of November 15th through the November 19th. A little interesting tidbit this year, 2021 marks the 100th year that American Education Week has been observed in our country. This year also holds added meaning as our educators continue to persevere through the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the course of the past year and a half, our teachers, paraprofessionals, school social workers, psychologists, our OT and PT and speech therapists, all of our educators have really stretched themselves to meet the needs of our students. From adapting to online learning platforms to giving that extra piece of themselves to ensure the social and emotional needs of students are being met during this challenging time. We thank and applaud our staff for going the extra mile and then some. It is also interesting to note that 100 years ago, the world was just coming out of another pandemic, and that was with the Spanish flu. I thought that was kind of interesting. The history behind American Education Week actually dates back to 1919, when the National Education Association was concerned that 25% of the nation's World War I draftees did not know how to read. The NEA teamed up with the American Legion to seek ways to generate support for public education. In 1921, the NEA Assembly in Des Moines, Iowa, at the Assembly in Des Moines, Iowa, a designation was created to recognize 1 week each year to spotlight education, calling for, quote, an educational week observed in all communities annually for the purpose of informing the public of the accomplishments and needs of the public schools and to secure the cooperation and support of the public in meeting those needs. Before too long, the observance was co-sponsored by the U.S. Office of Education, the National PTA, the American Legion Auxiliary, and a whole host of other organizations. The tradition continues today, and the resolution before you describes in detail the rationale for commemorating American Education Week each year in our country, our state, and in Livonia Public Schools. At this time, I'd like to invite Board Trustee Madeline Acosta to join me at the podium to read the resolution we've crafted. And also, if I could invite Mr. Lauren Schnell, one of our long-serving educators in LPS, to join to accept the resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Whereas, American Education Week, November 15th through the 19th, 2021, resolution. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And whereas public education employees work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism. And whereas schools unite entire communities, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common purpose. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the trustees of the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District do hereby proclaim November 15th through the 19th, 2021 as the 100th annual observance of American Education Week, and urge all citizens to make a commitment to public education and to the future of our children. Be it further resolved that the trustees of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education take this special occasion to thank Livonia Public Schools employees, parents, and community volunteers for the work they do to educate and support the children of our school district.
We'd like to present this to Lauren Schnell.
And it's the resolution.
All right, thank you very
Lauren,
much.
for everything you do for our community.
No, thank you.
Did you want to say a couple words?
Oh, just on behalf of all the employees of Livonia Public Schools, teachers, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, kitchen workers, custodians, everyone, thank you. This is very meaningful, especially in teaching during a pandemic. I know everyone appreciates the support and the accolades, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have comments and questions from board members or the superintendent? Mrs. Okest?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Schnell, for being here this evening on behalf of over 1,900 LPS staff in our school community, and for the tremendous efforts that have been made, not only this year, but every year prior. And it's a pretty special thing to be celebrating the 100th anniversary of American Education Week. The opportunity for our children to come to school, to learn each day, to have the privilege that we have to welcome our students in, to work closely with our parent community, our business partners on behalf of those children is truly a remarkable privilege. So thank you, Lauren, for being here this evening on behalf of all of our staff, and congratulations, and thank you to the board for this resolution.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I echo what Mrs. Okes has shared with us. We have been blessed to raise our children, and virtually most, if not all, folks in this room are either raising their children in this community or working to raise children in this community, and it truly is a blessing. One of the reasons I know that our family moved into this community, and so many have benefited from it, is the wide range of opportunities that we offer children. Whether folks need some special services, some remedial education, so if students are struggling with things, or if we have students who are kind of in the middle of the pack and need a variety of avenues to go down, to some that are on the high end academically and need additional challenges, including extracurricular activities. One of the reasons that so many people come to Livonia Public Schools is because we have so very many opportunities to offer our children. That can't happen without our entire staff working toward that end, and parents will support it. So it is an honor and a privilege to live in this community and to raise children here. And thank you to all of those who work in Livonia Public Schools to make that true for all of our families. Any other comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Jarosz, and Mrs. Bonifield, would you please take the roll for the American Education Week resolution?
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarosz?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. Thank you. The next, and Mr. Schnell, thank you very much for being with us this evening. It is very appreciated. The next item on our agenda is item 3B, district update from the superintendent. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Okest.
Well, thank you so much, President Burton. We love this opportunity each month to highlight our amazing students in schools and staff. And so we'll share some updates from you. It certainly has been the giving season and continues to be. It is not at all unusual to receive many offers of support from members of our business community, from fellow parents and staff, school PTAs, really across our community, asking how they can help families within Livonia and Westland. So we'd like to thank Pure Chiropractic. They donated 50 complete Thanksgiving meal boxes to LPS families. Those were delivered on Monday, and families enjoyed them this past week. So we are so grateful for that support. Additionally, Plymouth Home Depot donated $1,000 to Skillful Designs at the Western Wayne Skills Center at Garfield Community School. You see some of our wonderful students and staff there, and I'm going to ask Dr. Terriell to just give us just a 30-second highlight of Skillful Designs at Garfield Community School.
Thank you, Superintendent Okes. So this is a class that some of our students take at Garfield, where we have local community members. They will donate old furniture items to Garfield, and our students, including their teacher and a paraprofessional, will strip down the furniture and refurbish it by painting it or staining it. Then they put it on a website and resell it. So they have done some tremendous work. If you ever have the opportunity to go to Garfield and view some of the furniture that they have done, it is absolutely amazing. Great skills for our students to learn.
Yeah. Thank you. Moving right along, you may have seen on our social media posts, the LPS Education Foundation awarded almost $30,000 in grants over these past couple of weeks. We see just a couple of our grant recipients and students there, some pretty excited kiddos and staff as they received the surprise news the week prior to the Thanksgiving holiday. And we are just continue to be so grateful for the partnership of the LPS Education Foundation. I believe they awarded 17 grants in total, again, just under $30,000. They had the 5th annual Fleece and Thank You. If you have not heard of that before, Fleece and Thank You is a wonderful project where folks donate money, and the students from Stevenson High School, along with Holmes Middle School, it's the National Honor Society from each of those groups, organize a blanket making event. The volunteers made 114 fleece blankets for children who are in area hospitals. So they gather together, a donation is made to buy the fleece, and then students, staff, parents, friends come, and it's quite a wonderful event. This is their 5th year doing that, and many thanks to the folks from the National Honor Society, the staff at both Holmes and Stevenson for giving this source of comfort and warmth to children in local hospitals. We continue with the giving season. We have schools around the district who are collecting the canned food goods for Livonia Goodfellows. Churchill is always a remarkable school in regard to collecting these cans. They have a goal of over 30,000, so anything that we can do to help them out, please do. Community members can also make monetary donations via the Churchill website. And we have a winter clothing drive at Holmes Middle School. They are hosting that through December 15th. So items may be dropped off at Holmes during school hours. They have information on their website. We also have it on the district website. So there is great need for those items. So anything you could do that you would like to do to contribute in that area, that would be so greatly appreciated. Many of you have probably seen the big Be Kind signs around town. We've had one out front of central office. They have been over at City Hall, at the Chamber of Commerce, at some of our high schools. And we were, Mrs. Jenkins and I were approached several months ago this is organized by Rosedale Gardens Presbyterian Church, the City of Livonia, and the Chamber of Commerce. And since that time, many other organizations have signed on. I know members of our Livonia Police Department, Fire Department, and both Livonia and Clarenceville school districts have been part of this effort to spread some kindness and cheer. They are looking to recognize the staff and create blessing bags for LPS and Clarenceville staff in January. And so they have been encouraging people after they share a random act of kindness to take a photo in front of, to be the I in kind, and to share that widely to remember the importance of a kind word or a kind gesture. They are also having collections of $5 gift cards from local businesses, so it is a win-win for our local businesses that are selling those gift cards, and then also the staff who will be the recipients. I just wanted to highlight, just again, I know we've talked about our Livonia Transition Program and have been really able to share in celebration and pride the work that our students are doing in the community. But we have a number of sites, including Ward Presbyterian Church, St. Mary Mercy Hospital, Contoro, Italian Market. What am I missing? Embassy Suites, who's been a long time supporter. We have students throughout our community. As you know, they spend a portion of their day at Schoolcraft College. These are our students 18 to 26. They are learning essential skills for their transition into the next phase after their educational journey with LPS is concluded. And we have had such tremendous support from our community partners. This was a program founded by Dr. Terriel a number of years ago. It has been, it continues to grow under the leadership of Megan Sproul, one of our student services coordinators. And I have to just tell you, the opportunity to see our students with these real world work opportunities is absolutely amazing. They were literally all over St. Mary's Hospital, doing jobs in the cardio department, in food service, helping prep for surgeries, helping prep materials for surgeries. They're really just doing some tremendous work. And so there are many staff out in the field assisting, but also, again, some wonderful community partners who are helping provide those opportunities to our students, and we are very grateful for their partnership. So some congratulations are in order. I'm sure you know that our Franklin High School Patriots, our football team, were regional champs once again. They went to the semifinals, and we are so proud of their continued efforts. What exciting games they've had this season, as have so many of our fall teams. And speaking of exciting, you might remember meeting Mackenzie Soroki last year. She was here because she was a state champ as a sophomore. She is once again a back-to-back two-time state champ. She is a record holder with a new school record and a new state record. Wow. That is pretty remarkable, and to do that twice. In addition, you'll see Mackenzie is in her hockey jersey. She is transitioning winter season to play hockey for the Stevenson hockey team. So I'd like to just take a minute. I am going to read this on my screen because that is awfully small, and it is small on my screen. So we had the 200 medley relay team, 4th place best time and a new school record. The 200 free relay team, 4th best time of the year. And the 50 free, the 100 back, 100 fly, and 100 breaststroke, in which Mackenzie Soroki finished first, again, a new school and state record in just over 1 minute. So we look forward to welcoming her sometime in the next month or two when she can fit us into her schedule. As you know, we always welcome state champions to the board for special recognition. So congratulations to all of our wonderful athletes. Speaking of wonderful athletes and programs, congratulations to Stevenson hockey coach Dave Mitchell. He was recently inducted into the Michigan High School Hockey Coaches Association Hall of Fame. He was honored along with other coaches from the state at Munn Arena at Michigan State in East Lansing. It's a huge honor to have one of our coaches be part of the State Coaches Association Hall of Fame. Congratulations to him and the amazing dedication he gives to our program. So we recently had one of our students, the Rotary, Livonia Rotary, both AM Rotary and our Noon Rotary are just tremendous partners for our school district in supporting our students. We recently had one of our students, Sasha, who received the Vocation Service Award from the Rotary Club in Livonia. She is part of the Criminal Justice Program over at LCTC, and she was recently honored for her efforts. I'm going to tell you, this is exciting. This is not the first time we have brought this to you, but once again, our LPS Transportation Department, our fleet crew in the garage, our mechanics, and our fleet supervisor, Rick Martin, received a certificate of excellence from the Michigan State Police following a perfect safety inspection of our entire bus fleet. Livonia Public Schools is one of just 3 in Michigan to score 100% on this important annual safety inspection. I think that deserves a round of applause. And I'm going to tell you they're working with a small but mighty crew. We are so grateful for their continued efforts. They just make us proud each and every day, and most of all, help us keep our kiddos safe. Speaking of transportation update, I will briefly share we sent out a notification to families who utilize LPS bus transportation to update that we are making some progress. We have hired a few more drivers, so we are able to, rather than 4 routes, having service interruption each week. Well, last week we did not have any. It was a short week, and so our other folks pitched in to cover those couple days. Starting this week, we're down to 3 routes for service interruption, and then we're hoping to continue to lessen that as drivers complete their training and we're able to get more folks on the road. We are, again, so grateful for everyone who's partnered together to help us provide that opportunity for our kiddos to get to school, and we will continue to work on this challenge. So the Miriam Bright Parade, it's been around, this wonderful Christmas parade for the past several years, I think, at least a handful of years. We have had many of our school groups in the Miriam Bright Parade, and I'd like to share with you participating from LPS this Sunday will be all 3 high school marching bands, which I'll tell you is always a highlight. Franklin Palm, Stevenson Hockey, Hoover Elementary, LPS Transportation will once again have a decorated bus, of course. SAD, Stevenson Students Against Destructive Decisions, and Stevenson Cheer. So thanks to all of those student groups and their supervisors who are going to bundle up on Sunday, and we hope you will join as the route goes from Frost Middle School down to City Hall, and I believe Santa lights the tree on the City Hall grounds, so we are so excited about that. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong one there. Okay. I just wanted to mention Mrs. Jenkins in our communications department really does a fabulous job of pulling together and a lot of good news posts from our social media, combines them into a Friday roundup. It was something that our Board of Education was looking for a few years back for us to continue to tell the wonderful stories within Livonia Public Schools. So we want to remind our schools and classrooms, teachers, parents to use hashtag Livonia Pride so we can add posts to the roundup. And we'll wrap it up here with a reminder that we are hiring. We'd love to have some folks join our team in food service, transportation, and school-age childcare. There is a careers tab that have all of the details for those positions. And finally, we don't want you to forget, we have had, thanks to our amazing Student Services Department, we have had a social emotional hotline in place since March 16th of 2020. It is a phone line that is manned 24/7. We also have an internal extension if somebody is at a school and wants to dial that number, and an email address. If you need support, we are here. Please reach out. And we want to just thank all of our families and staff who participated in the recent survey we sent out with regard to the federal grant for the ESSER's $3. One piece of that is to receive stakeholder input. We've gotten just a tremendous response. We sent out a reminder email just this afternoon, and we welcome your feedback. So thank you, President Burton. It was a long one, but we had lots of good things to share.
That's wonderful. We love it. Anytime you want to add more good things to share, go right ahead. All righty. Moving on from our agenda this evening, written communications is the next item on our agenda, item 3C. Does any board member have written communications that they'd like to share at this time? No. Seeing none, we are going to go to response to prior audience communications. And Mr. Centers, you requested a time slot.
Yes. I want to comment in regards to the regular Livonia School Board meeting of October 18th. There was some miscommunication regarding some of the details of the meeting. At that meeting, there was not screaming and the board was not overrun. However, it is true that the business of the board was stopped and the police were involved when an individual would not follow county health department mask requirements. As a whole, our district stakeholders have followed health and safety measures, and I really applaud that effort, especially now when we see a spike in cases. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other response to prior audience communications. These are some of the items that have come across as items of audience communications in the last couple of meetings that are of broad interest to the community as opposed to an individual situation. There have been repeated requests for relaxation of the mask policy. Again, we want to make sure that everyone understands that the mask policy is that of the Wayne County Health Department. Every public and private school in the state of Michigan is required to follow a mask policy for all individuals who are in schools, regardless of vaccination status. As that executive order reads at this time, that will take place until there are either 14 consecutive days of the COVID cases in the county being in the moderate or low category, or until Wayne County changes this order. So just to make it clear that this is not a policy of Livonia Public Schools, but rather we are bound to follow the law, and this mask policy is law in Wayne County. Kind of connected to this, recently, within the last few weeks, the MHSAA, which is the Michigan High School Athletic Association, issued guidance that students who are in active participation in their sport be permitted to do so without a mask. When you read the entire MHSAA guidance, guidance, the very first statement said that that any school district is not to be out of compliance with any county health order. Therefore, the request by MHSAA, if we were in a county, and we are, that has a county-wide mask mandate, they encouraged us to contact the county to find out if we can abide by this MHSAA guidance and therefore allow students who are in active competition to do so without a mask. Livonia Public Schools, along with all other public schools in the KLAA, has requested this permission from Wayne County to be allowing our students to be mask-free and yet not be out of compliance with the law. The Wayne County Health Department, as of about a week or so ago, did issue that permission for school districts to make that decision. And to my knowledge, all of the districts in the KLAA, which is the Kensington Lakes Athletic Association, of which Livonia Public Schools is one, decided to go ahead with and follow that guidance of the MHSAA in permitting our athletes to compete without a mask while they are in active competition. The mask mandate still does apply during all other times, such as bus rides, locker rooms, being on the bench, etc. But during active competition, we have permission from the Wayne County Health Department and the recommendation from the MHSAA. So that is what the Livonia Public Schools, along with KLAA, will be doing. We also have been asked about bus drivers, and Mrs. Oquist really covered that in detail, so I don't think we really have anything else to add to that. We are actively looking for bus drivers, as frankly most districts certainly in the state, and it really is a nationwide issue. We have hired some. There's a training process that they have to go through, and we also are trying very hard not to have some keep our numbers stable while we are hiring some, training some, but some folks do go out on leave, et cetera. So it is a bit of a numbers game, but we are doing our best to keep our numbers as high as possible. That is the end of response to prior audience communications. At this time, we have audience communications for this evening. We have had a few more blue slips come in since our board made that decision. Board members, are we still comfortable taking all of our audience communication at this time, even though we're exceeding our 15 minutes because we made that decision earlier in our meeting? Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Johnson, would you please take care of our timing for us? Thank you. Audience communication, as a reminder, for those who may not have been present during this in the past, audience communications is a time for the Board of Education to listen to members of the community. It is not a question and answer session, rather it is a listening session. Each individual is allotted 3 minutes. The reason that it's 3 minutes is so that everybody can be heard and that everybody has a fair amount of time to be heard, as opposed to picking and choosing who gets a longer or shorter amount of time to speak. We will have a timer set for 3 minutes when our speakers begin speaking. If you hear that timer go off, that's your cue that it's time to wrap up your comments. We find that to be a more polite and respectful way than interrupting a speaker. But we do ask that if you hear that timer that you wrap your comments up at that time. The role of the Board of Education is threefold. It is to hire and evaluate the superintendent, to set policies for the district, and to set the long-term or strategic goals and align the finances to those goals. As such, if your comments pertain to those 3 areas and you have a specific question, you can expect a response to your question within a few days from the Board of Education. Frequently, the concern or the question falls outside of those 3 roles in what we can refer to as day-to-day operations. If that is the case, you can expect, and you have a direct question, you can expect a response back from our administrative team as they handle our day-to-day issues. So that would be Mrs. Oquist or a member of our administrative team. Again, you have our commitment as folks participating in audience communications that you will have the respect of the Board of Education and our full attention. I also request that whether we agree or disagree with any given speaker, that all members of our audience this evening give the same respect of quiet listening to each speaker. Again, that is the best way that we can teach our children, is to be respectful to one another at this level. Mrs. Bonfield, did you have something you'd like to add?
President Burton, just during your MHSAA comments.
Yes.
You, I believe, I may have misheard, that you said that there was a state mask mandate.
Oop, thank
During
you.
those comments, and I just wanted to make sure that we clarify that.
Thank you.
It is not a state mask mandate, that this is regarding Wayne County specifically, and you can correct me if
Nope.
I'm wrong.
That's between the state, the MHS, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't want that to be wrong at this table. The MHSAA is the Michigan High School Athletic Association. They issue recommendations, not rules, but recommendations for the athletics in the state. And yes, you are correct that Wayne County has issued a mask mandate, as some other counties have done. But we fall under Wayne County's mask mandate. And thank you very much for your correction on that. I appreciate it. Let's see here. Our first speaker this evening is Mr. Kevin Johnson. And Mr. Johnson, you can feel free to come to the podium here, right in the middle. Good evening. And if you could just take a look at that microphone and tap the red glowing portion, and it should turn green for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe it's right in front of the microphone. One more tap. Yeah, there you go. Looks like screen now. You're on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm a Livonia resident, and I live a block away from the former Jefferson School site. That's at 9501 Henry Ruff, adjacent to the Devonair Park and Ice Arena. The City of Livonia's online database indicates that the Livonia Public Schools continues to be the property owner of that site, even though the school has been demolished for a number of years now. So for over a year now, the former school site has been the staging area for a major water shutoff valve construction project. In fact, for the past several years, in addition to this project, the Board of Education has allowed for this site to be used as a staging area for other construction projects as well. And if any of you have driven by this site right in the middle of our very densely populated residential neighborhood, you will have noticed it's become a perpetual place of heavy construction equipment and unsightly mounds of dirt. We've also been subjected to a constant rumbling of trucks going up and down the streets all day long, which has been especially burdensome for those of us who are working from home. And of course, this sort of heavy equipment moving along our residential streets is a constant endangerment to school-age children. We've mostly been patient with accepting the City of Livonia's word that it's a necessary project. However, that project has now crossed over to the other side of Merriman. And so we wonder, why is property in our neighborhood now staging area for another area? So I say it's just time to say no. We should not be subjected to school property serving as a perpetual construction site anymore. Livonia Public Schools has to do the right thing and relinquish the property. If you're not using the land for its intended purpose, education, well, then you need to just let go of the land. Permanent construction staging never was the intended use and never should be the intended use. Let the city identify a site along a major road, not within the interior of our neighborhoods. So I petition this elected autonomous body, just clean up the site and stop this constant rumbling of trucks in our neighborhoods, and just put this land back to a productive use once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ellen Coyne. Good evening.
Hello. During the October 18th Livonia School Board meeting, a parent shared an experience that his child had at a Livonia high school concerning COVID tracking. The parent said the student was asked by either a teacher or an administrator whether they were vaccinated. This parent wondered if the question was asked in error and voiced that the question should have been asked to the parent rather than the child. This parent also inquired about the management of the tracking information. After the meeting, I was directed to Jennifer Terriol, the Director of Student Services. She was kind enough to provide detailed information about the tracking process. If a student has possibly been exposed to COVID, a limited number of administrators within each building may ask the student if they are vaccinated. Whether a student or a parent says they have received two doses of the vaccine or have recovered from COVID, the parent will need to show proof to school administrators. A vaccine card or a PCR test result is read, but not copied or stored in any manner by the school. The student's personal COVID information is not being preserved. Positive notifications of COVID or other illnesses like chickenpox, for example, is forwarded on to Wayne County Health Department. The student's name, date, and return date are supplied. With vaccine options for younger students, I expect middle school and upper elementary school students to be asked this question very soon. Also, as mentioned on the October 18th meeting, the police were called. A parent was removed for trespassing. Both the parent and police were respectful during this incident. Unfortunately, in a recent committee meeting, Michigan Senator Polhanke, who was not in attendance at the school board meeting, grossly misrepresented the actions of this Livonia parent who had an ADA exemption from wearing a mask. Livonia School Board has noted they are following Wayne County Health Department's mandates concerning masks. What I would like to know, my question is, and I'm noticing some people here today without masks, is if the board is following Wayne County Health Department guidance in discriminating against persons with disabilities, or are you following guidance from other organizations, or is this something the Livonia School Board came up with on your own?
Thank you. The next speaker that we have this evening is Nick Palazzolo. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Nick Palazzolo. I'm the president of the United Parents of Livonia Public Schools, and I'm going to read the following letter this evening. Dan Centers, due to the following reasons, we, your constituents and/or LPS parents, call on you to do the right thing and resign from your position as Livonia Public Schools Board of Trustee immediately. You are responsible for the dishonest information that led to the accusations made on the Michigan Senate floor by State Senator Dana Polhanke, your boss. As her chief of staff, you sat behind her on October 19th while she blatantly vilified every law-abiding citizen at the October 18th Livonia Public School Board meeting. You have neglected to issue a statement correcting the record about your constituents at that board meeting for well over a month now. Tonight doesn't count either, bud. Multiple LPS parents have sent emails confronting you concerning the text messages you sent to Senator Polhanke, which she has cited as the source for claiming this about your constituents, and I quote, "But I will tell you that my chief of staff, who's sitting behind me right now, is also a school board member. And last night he texted me from the back of a school board room of a school board meeting where the school board members were overrun by hostile, screaming people opposing the school's mask mandate, which was administered by the health department." Dana Polhanke continued, "The police were called and it was ugly, and that's why I introduced this bill to stop it." Your email reply to these parents stated this: "Thank you for your message. Just to be clear, people screaming at the meeting was not something I witnessed or relayed to Senator Polhanke. That fact was a miscommunication. However, sadly, the board did go into recess because of mask discompliance. in following the county health requirement on masking. This resulted in a long recess and police involvement. Your response assumes zero responsibility for the damaged reputation of your constituents. You have not been forthcoming with the content of your communications with Senator Polhanke on October 18, 2021. Therefore, we are requesting the text messages sent and received between you and Senator Polhanke on October 18, 2021 under the Freedom of Information Act. Your actions and words, which led to a false narrative, was used to fuel Senator Polhanke's oppressive legislation, Senate Bill 689, that was designed to intimidate and silence parents instead of encouraging advocacy and dialogue on the behalf of their children. According to the Revised School Code Act of 1976, Section 380.10, it is the natural fundamental right of parents and legal guardians to determine and direct the care, teaching, and education of their children. Public schools of this state serve the need of the pupils by cooperating with the pupils' parents and legal guardians to develop the pupils' intellectual capabilities and vocational skills in a safe, positive environment. Dan Centers, it is clear that the miscommunication between you and Senator Polhanke and your position as her chief of staff has stained your integrity and confused your responsibility to the people of Livonia.
Mr. Polozzolo, you've reached your 3 minutes. If you could wrap your comments up, it would be
Wrapping up right now. You have disrespected the fundamental rights of parents in our district, failing in your capacity as a school board trustee. Therefore, you have lost all trust. We, the undersigned constituents and/or parents of Livonia Public Schools and students, call on you to resign immediately from your position on the Livonia Public School Board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, buddy.
Our next speaker is Jerry Fraske, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anyone's names.
No, that's correct.
Yes. I have it.
Good evening.
Again.
Uh,
Good evening.
I've been a resident of Livonia for some 40 years.
Yes.
Both my sons were educated through the Livonia school system. They graduated from Franklin High School about 15 and 20 years ago. They went on to college, did very well, and they're doing very well in their careers right now. So I have no axe to grind about their education or even a specific complaint against the board tonight. But I do feel a connection with the students and parents here. As after retiring from my career work, I decided to sign on as a Livonia school bus driver about 8 years ago. And it's been a great experience. I've met a lot of nice kids and their parents. And frankly, I think it's a great job for a retiree. So I tell my friends that, or anyone who's interested, that great hours, and it's just a good experience, a lot of fun. Okay, so why am I here tonight? I do have a concern. In response to a letter from the National School Board Association dated 9/29/21, Attorney General Merrick Garland, just 2 days afterwards, directed the FBI to intervene with state and local officials to investigate claims of threats by parents to school boards. Now, a few weeks later, Garland testified before a congressional panel that he wasn't aware of any specific threats of violence, nor did he investigate any such possible threats. He just took the letter at face value. Now, there was some backlash. On October 27th, the NSBA apologized for the letter comparing parents to terrorists. And since then, 23 state school board associations have distanced themselves from the NSBA, and at least 7 have withdrawn membership altogether. Now, why should parents be concerned about this? Well, a couple of examples. Prior to the last Virginia gubernatorial election, Democrat candidate Terry McAuliffe in a debate stated, "Parents should have no say in what their children are taught in school." And another example, which many of you should be aware of, was the Loudoun County, Virginia situation in which a female student was sexually assaulted in a restroom, a school restroom, and when the parents did not yield to the board to just sweep it under the rug, they accused the child and the parent of lying about it. Now, I can't think, another thing is, just a few weeks ago, it was revealed that the FBI is now tagging parents who may be a threat. Now, I can't think of anything more chilling or intimidating to a parent who wants to raise an issue to their local school board and run the risk of being labeled a domestic terrorist and get a visit from the FBI or DOJ, CIA, IRS, maybe even ABC Warehouse. Now, I don't condone violence or the threat of violence at all, but we've got a police department right across the street that can take care of any situation that gets out of hand, and I'm confident that state and local law enforcement could handle any situation and investigate any situation.
Excuse me, Mr. Fraske, you've gone beyond your 3 minutes. If
Okay.
you could wrap up your comments, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, real quick. The FBI shouldn't be a first responder to these things. Now, the Patriot Act was supposed to protect us from people flying into buildings, not to go after parents who passionately voice legitimate concerns about their children's education. I don't know what's happening in this country and with this current administration in Washington, but it's scary and it's dangerous. And I just hope the school board will not be part of it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Narman Jarosz. Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry, I'm a little shorter.
Nope, that's okay. Feel free to adjust it.
Good evening. I'd like to start off by thanking you all for your time. I can't imagine what it must be like to trying to shape students' futures in such a dramatically unstable and unsafe time. So I thank you guys for your diligent work. My name is Narman Jarosz. I am a 2014 Stevenson High School graduate. I'm a proud Livonia alum, and my little brother Christopher currently attends Stevenson. I care deeply about the educational process and know the importance a good foundation has on students' futures. That's why I'm here today regarding the policies and procedures that I don't think are in the best interest of students, which are the way we're communicating the current attendance policy when juxtaposed to the way we're communicating our disability resources. I'm deeply worried about the implications for students with disabilities at Livonia Public Schools as someone with a disability. When I attended Holmes Middle School and Stevenson High School, I missed a lot of classes. I was suffering from a chronic disease, and I had medical documentation that exhaustively explained all of my inabilities. I suffered from chronic pain, nausea, and severe fatigue, and I still performed very well. I was an honor student. I was a Holmes yearbook editor. I took almost every AP class and gave the commencement speech at the 2014 graduation. However, my second semester senior year, Stevenson High School administration encouraged me to drop out of Stevenson High School. Despite my good grades, despite my participation in extracurriculars, my absences overshadowed any passion I had for school in the administrator's eyes. Despite the medical documentation, I was questioned whether my disability was real or whether it was psychosomatic, and I was not provided with any disability resources or counseling. I was instead told that I would not make it in college and I should highly rethink my future plans, which was a very jarring thing to hear as a 17-year-old. I didn't listen. I did not drop out of Stevenson. I graduated and gave the commencement speech. I attended the University of Michigan Dearborn and helped start a company that made history in the state of Michigan. And then I moved our headquarters to Livonia because it's home. And I work really closely with the state of Michigan to promote social equity across different industries. My disability did not hold me back, but the words of administrators who cared more about attendance policies almost did. I'm here today knowing that the schools are underfunded, teachers are overworked and can be underpaid, and everyone's dealing with a very unstable and scary landscape when it comes to schooling. And I understand the state has mandated certain attendance policies, and there's only so much that can be done in that regard. However, I do not understand why disability resource information isn't readily available to students. I think there are many ways that we can encourage attendance policies and participation that are more equitable and don't rely on historically ableist policies in this space. The current attendance policy in regards to Stevenson High School spans 3 pages in the student handbook and has its own page on the website. I did have trouble finding other information regarding disability resources, what type of support is offered, who to seek out if we need support, and the recommended procedures were not readily available. If I can't find this information online or in the student handbook myself, and the district can't provide this information when asked for it, I just don't really see how students are going to find it. This puts disabled students at risk of slipping through the cracks and puts an undue burden on teachers who are already burning out to help their students navigate these issues. Disabled students deserve to feel safe and welcome in our schools. They should not have to jump through hoops to have the same educational opportunities as any other student. I believe that information is power, and not providing these students with the information that would make for a more equitable school district is not just disheartening, but does not uphold the district's mission statement of teaming together to ensure learning for all. But thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Kelly Dobson.
I can yield my time, it's been covered.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening is Crystal. In case anybody didn't hear that, Mrs. Dobson indicated that she wishes to yield her time because her topic had been covered. Our next speaker this evening is Crystal Fulton. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm going to be reading an email from Janine Emmerich. I was one of the parents who attended the last meeting who was slandered by Mr. Center's boss, Senator Polhanke, to the Michigan State Senate. As grotesque as it was to witness, it became an excellent opportunity for our children to see firsthand how deceitful politicians can be and how their actions often have more to do with serving their political allies and aspirations than they do actually serving the people they were elected to serve. The pre-holiday letter I received stating that LPS has the appropriate mitigation measures in place and mask wearing and vaccinations as our strongest measures against the spread has me utterly baffled as to how this district can continue to deny reality with the overwhelming evidence you have to the contrary. In the survey that followed this letter asking for our input in adding measures to address the damage these mandates continue to inflict is offensive. How long are we expected to allow this abuse to continue at the expense of our children's education and mental health? A month ago, our healthy son was quarantined after being seated next to a fully vaccinated student who was COVID positive and is suffering academically for the first time in his academic career. As you know, there was an outbreak at a Churchill School event that resulted in a spike of COVID cases, reported as 26 versus 3 and 2 in the prior weeks. Among a group of children that were 90% vaccinated, one of the students who attended this event and tested positive chose to attend classes hours prior to being tested, either due to the false sense of security, the propaganda that this district promotes, or simply because they were allowed to. I can't say. But the fact that this is the same child that regularly tells our son to get the vaccine just so he doesn't have to quarantine says a lot to me. Conditioning our children to accept that education is a reward for conformity seems to go against so many of the other values that this district touts. If masks work, why are we quarantining anyone? And if masks work, why has my kindergartner been sick back to back to back since school started? It sure appears that these policies are more about politics than stopping the spread of COVID. Knowing that only one of you on this board has children currently attending school suffering the consequences of these mandates and constant barrage of COVID, I am asking you to take to heart what we parents are sharing with you, as well as the overwhelming evidence you yourselves have showing that these mitigation measures have done nothing but leave our children uneducated and mentally ill. Additionally, I would like to see you take responsibility and acknowledge that you do have power to make change, that this doesn't just fall onto the health department. As Senator Polhanke herself so proudly shared via Facebook on August 26, it was she and several other senators who directed the health department to issue their mandates. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kevin Wellner.
How y'all doing today?
Good evening. Doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I don't have anything prepared, just basically what I'm hearing from my daughter goes to school and from her friends. I think, like we've heard from them, there's quite a bit of support saying that these masks ain't doing too much. Like all the little gaps on your sides there, the people who determine who wear masks for certain jobs, I'm sure you guys would know by now after 2 years, are industrial hygienists. They say once 3% of that mask is exposed, it's absolutely worthless. So if you had like respirators or something for our children and gave them to them in their daily, that'd make more sense. I still would be against it. But my daughter, from the first time, like at the beginning of the year, we said if they're doing masks, we're not doing it. And then you guys know it was like 2 weeks before everybody registered, and then like a couple weeks later, you guys said it's going to be mandatory. So we were already kind of registered. She's like, Dad, I want to do it. I'm 14, it's high school. Even though in my heart I was like, I don't want to have her do it, but you know, sometimes you got to learn. But this is something for health. You know, she's got asthma. So her doctor said she'd give something. You guys said she would have to like wear a face shield, so she'd be like one kid walking around looking like Darth Vader instead of everybody else, which you know, as a young teenager is kind of, it's hard on you. You know, you don't want to stand out. You don't want to feel awkward. You don't want any of that, you know. So all of us were kids. All of us were in school. We know we don't want to go through that. We're literally still masking these kids up is absolutely ridiculous when there's now, you know, whatever they say, science. Industrial hygienists, 10 out of the 10 that I've looked into say these things do not work. Even the leading one, he's testified in 900 cases. I mean, he's the leading dude that they get for these. Said in the first few weeks he had a respirator on, getting on to Spirit Airlines, I believe it was. I'm not sure what airline, whatever it was. They told him, sir, you still have to have a mask on. He said, hey, man, I do this for a living. I've got 9 patents. The dude's a genius. And they said, you still got to have that on under your respirator. He had to fight with him to still be able to wear the respirator because this is on the onset of it. So he himself was concerned about COVID, as we all were for the first few months until we started educating ourselves and looking into people who really assign what goes on. It ain't OSHA, it's these industrial hygienists. They're the ones that tell doctors what to wear. So when we're calling to a doctor's and some of these doctors are going, no, your kid has asthma. That's what the first doctor said. She should wear it because she's more prone to getting it. So, you know, I don't want to write her something for a face shield. In reality, this industrial hygienist or somebody quite like him is the one who told those doctors what they need to be wearing. It helps, you know, the little droplets. I'm sure we've all heard this. So to keep having these kids wear this, all these little girls that she hangs out with, all their faces are breaking out. It's a dirt collecting cesspool. My kid, like somebody else had said, their kid has been sick a few times this year. Mine too, with a cough, with respiratory. And you guys had mentioned, somebody had mentioned earlier about the Spanish flu. Back then it was the same thing. Most of those people were in big trouble from upper respiratory infections from wearing that and the bacteria collecting inside of there. So I'm just asking you guys, really look into it. When you're saying it's a law, it's not a law, it's a mandate. Mandates aren't laws, and I'm sure many people stood up here and have told you that. So I'm just asking you guys, really look into it, man. Like if the kids want to wear it and their parents want them to wear it and get vaccinated, cool. If they don't, then kind of leave that to us. The health department doesn't make laws like that, you know. They're suggestions. So appreciate your time. You guys have a good one.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tanya Hugh.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. That's very kind of you. As you guys know, I was the one that you illegally trespassed outside of here when you guys knew that you were against a whole lot of my rights, which is why we are all now happily unmasked. In any case, it kind of goes towards you guys saying there's a law and that you guys have no business telling us what, that you guys can change the options. And I have a book right here. I don't know if anybody has heard of it, but it's called The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates, which is who you guys are, which is who all of us are that have the ability to sit on a board and protect and take care of the people, the 14,000 almost children that you guys have underneath of you. I know for the last year and a half, you guys know that this is a political agenda because you're part of the political agenda, sitting behind somebody telling them that you texted them when you didn't speak up or anything else. Can't even look me in the eye. Thank you. So I would just like to read from this book. John Knox in 1558 had stated that he wrote his appeal to declare to the nobles as lesser magistrates that their responsibility to protect the innocent and oppose those who made unjust decrees. He wanted them to understand that they had a duty before God to act against unjust laws or edicts in their nation, and that their failure to act would affect the whole nation or all of the children that are underneath of you. And he calls out the lesser magistrates who, just like you guys, use the higher magistrates as an excuse for their inaction, saying, "Be not deceived, my lords, you are placed in authority for another purpose other than to flatter your political party, kings, and the folly, and follow them in blind rage. But before God, it shall not excuse you to allege, we are no kings, and therefore neither can we reform religion or the laws or the mandates or whatever else you guys want to use as excuses. You are the lesser magistrates for nearly 14,000 kids, but you have no appreciation for your own authority as magistrates, nor do you understand your grave duty because of your oath of office and the fact that you guys are above these children and can protect them from all of these higher authorities telling you that something that is illegally a law and not a law or whatever. So what I want to request from you guys is that somebody, anybody on this board, be a lesser magistrate for our children. It's scary to stand outside of common whatever. It's easy to say, I can't say anything, there's somebody above me, but yes, you can. You can stand up for it. I know you guys have consciences. I don't know if you guys believe in God, but as these children, that's what you're on this board to do, is to protect these kids. And you know for a fact, every single one of you do. You have cheese pictures without your mask on. All of you, there's pictures with our governor without masks on. The masks don't work. You guys all know that. It is a facade. It's a game. And we're just asking you to love and protect these children that are underneath of you and quit giving them over to the demonic entities that are currently running the Democratic Party. Thank you for being there. I can't wait till you guys are all resigned and next year we have a new set of people there. Have a good day.
Our next speaker is Patrick Onai, I believe is how to pronounce the name.
It's O'Neill.
O'Neill, sorry.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. It's been many a year since I've been to one of these meetings. My children have gone through the system. They've gone through college, out in the workforce. And the reason I came today mainly was to encourage you to ignore people who have no idea about health care and the best needs of the children of our community, and do the best thing you can do to make sure our children are safe from COVID. There's a couple reasons to do this. I'm advocating it. One is the golden rule. If I was a child in the school system, I would want to be protected from COVID. You have more expertise than I do about this. You know what has been recommended, and I urge you to follow that. I don't know if you can encourage children to get, their parents to get children vaccinated. If you can, I encourage you to do that. But there's a second reason for doing this. Livonia has a very good reputation, and our property values, to a great extent, rely on the reputation of the school district. And if the school district is not doing its job, it's not protecting the children from COVID, that's going to affect our property values. And I'm less worried about that, though, than I am about the welfare of the children. But I voted for Dan Centers, as I voted for a number of you here. I don't like the idea of someone who just doesn't like something he did to demand a recall. There were a lot of things that Donald Trump did that I didn't like, particularly separating parents from children, and yet I didn't call for a recall. I don't know anybody who, not a recall, I'm sorry, for resignation, and I don't know of anybody who did that. You're elected for a term. We expect you to fill your obligation during that term. If you have to resign for health reasons or some other reasons, fine. But I think Mr. Centers should continue to do the job he was elected for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is James Amen, or Amen. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I am well. I was just coming to speak in front of you. I just wanted to say that I've attended quite a few of your board meetings. Typically, they are very routine, subdued, and quiet, just business as usual meetings. However, last October, when we had meetings concerning masking policies, I noticed it was louder than usual, and some people could be described as angry or passionate on the subject. It varies depending upon that person's point of view. It's my understanding that Dan Center's words were taken out of context that night, but that night was not business as usual. I know the board wants to ensure our children are safe, provided for, able to attend school, and I know Dan Centers wants the same for our children. With that, I ask we get back to business as usual, and I fully support Dan Centers on the board. And please also, I would encourage you to follow the advice of our medical professionals when it comes to masks and vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Bryce Connor. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Bryce Connor. I second that letter that Nick Palazzolo read, but I'm just here to say what some of the other parents already said, that it's not law by the Wayne County. Maybe they request it, maybe they ask that you do it, maybe it's a mandate, but it's not a law. You don't have to have the students do it. It should be their choice. We should be able to choose to wear our masks or choose not to. Some of us like it, some of us don't. Some of us are getting our vaccine and some of us aren't. So you should leave it up to the children and their parents. You shouldn't have teachers or staff members asking the children if they got vaccinated. That's part of their medical history. That's their information to choose to say, and they shouldn't have to be asked that. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one factual clarification. This was read at a previous meeting, but it was not read tonight, so since the topic had been brought up, I will read it again. This is regarding the wearing of masks at school board meetings as opposed to in other school settings. Our practice in Livonia Public Schools has always been and will continue to be to strictly adhere to the requirements set forth for public school districts. After continued attempts to gain clarification from multiple agencies on the emergency order announced August 27th by the Wayne County Health Department, we received a definitive response from the Chief Health Officer of Wayne County on Friday, November 12th, stating that since our board meetings are held in a facility that does not house students, we are not mandated to require masks as a condition of entry for visitors to school board meetings. Masks are requested and strongly recommended to be worn to school board meetings in Livonia Public Schools. This does not change the mask requirement set forth by the Wayne County Health Department for all schools in Wayne County, including Livonia Public Schools. Alrighty, the next item on our agenda, hang on a moment please, next item on our agenda is our consent agenda, and may I have a motion please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of October 18th, 2021. 5B, minutes of the special meeting of November 8th, 2021. 5C, minutes of the closed session of November 8th, 2021. 5D, minutes of the special meeting of November 15th, 2021.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Centers. Do any board members have any items that they would like to have removed from the consent agenda for discussion or comments or questions at a later time in the meeting? Seeing none, we have a motion for the consent agenda by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Centers. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Let's see, Mrs. Bonnefield says yes, and President Burton.
Yes, and that motion passes. Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. The next item on our agenda is item 6, business matters, and 6A is the purchase of maintenance equipment for the 2021 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mr. Johnson.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District authorize the purchase of the following maintenance equipment. 1 930M wheel loader from Michigan Cat, Novi, Michigan, in the amount of $201,492.68. 1 Toro Groundsmaster from Spartan Distributors, Auburn Hills, Michigan, in the amount of $134,482.92. And 4 Grasshopper 99D zero-turn lawn cutters from J&R Tractor, Monroe, Michigan, in the amount of $76,600 for a grand total of $412,575.60.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And I believe it is Mr. Francis who will be addressing this item with us.
Thank you, President Burton. This purchase of the maintenance equipment listed will update the current maintenance and grounds equipment the department is currently using. These items have been used through an appropriate life cycle and are in need of replacement via the 2021 bond initiative, while they can still bring value to the district via trade-in or auction. And I recommend board approval of this purchase.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions from the board or superintendent at this time on this item? We are going to go into a series right now of the types of items that we discussed earlier as having been discussed at length, at least at the previous study and committee of the whole sessions, or committee of the whole meetings rather, which is why you probably will not hear as many questions and answers about these items as you might expect. Again, this was discussed at length earlier.
We discussed this at the previous committee of the whole meeting, and the board, in addition to that conversation during that board meeting, has the quotes and some memos from both Mr. Lau and myself with regard to what we'll be doing with the current items that the maintenance department and grounds department uses, et cetera. So yes, we've had quite a bit of discussion and information exchanged via the board packet as well as your meetings.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Burton. Mr. Francis, I apologize, I wasn't here for the committee of the whole meeting.
Yes, sir.
On the purchase price for the, I think it's the loader, the 201,000. I think that's what it is, if I can get my.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 930M wheel loader.
Mm-hmm.
It notes on the sales price, it says trade 36,000.
Mm-hmm.
Is the 201,000 net of the 36, or is it taken from that?
Thank you for bringing that up. It was something we did discuss during the committee of the whole meeting, which, like you mentioned, you were not at, so I'll just explain it again for yourself and anyone else that's watching at home. That's the full price. While there is a trade-in approximated in the quote, we did not want to end up in a situation where it may be different by the time we make the purchase. We're $5 off, and the board only approved a certain amount. So we are getting board approval on the entire cost of the new item. Any trade-in value will, be brought back, but we can always have the board approve a higher number, as the board knows, too low, and then we'd be stuck not being able to purchase it.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. That makes perfect sense to me.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Jarosz, for the purchase of maintenance equipment from the 2021 bond. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarosz?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. Thank you. We did have to close our doors due to noise in the hallway. Could I ask that we do have one person posted at door to my left. Can I have a cabinet member posted at this door in case anyone wishes to enter to make certain that they know that they are able to do so? Yep. Thank you. And thank you very much for closing the doors. It was necessary because the noise was getting pretty loud. Our next item on our agenda is item 6, business matters, and 6B is the bid results for the radio tower replacement. May I have a motion, please?
President Byrd.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District authorize the purchase, demolition, and reinstallation of a radio tower for the Transportation Department from C3 Communications, Oxford, Michigan, for a cost of $59,950 plus a contingency amount of $5,500 for a total approved amount of $65,450.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mr. Francis.
Thank you again. As discussed at the Committee of the Whole meeting 2 weeks ago, this is an over 40-year-old tower. This has the antenna at the top of the tower, which is the transponder or antenna for our Livonia Public Schools Transportation Department. This is how the buses communicate with each other, back to the base, and to the dispatchers, etc. So it is not in good repair, as we had talked about, and we put out for bid the removal and then installation of a new tower. After the bid, low responsible bidder is C3 Communications out of Oxford, and I do recommend them to you.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions from?
And as I know, I apologize just to throw it out there, and this will be coming from the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Mr. Centers.
Mr. Francis, is this a, maybe not an exact replica of what is up there now, but is it similar?
It's a one-for-one replacement, let's put it that way. It's an in-kind replacement. Certainly, the one that's there now is from 40-plus years ago, so they won't look exactly the same, but it's an in-kind replacement.
Comments or questions from other board members or the superintendent? Seeing none, we have a motion for the bid results for the radio tower replacement by Mr. Centers, supported by Mr. Johnson. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. Mrs. Jarosz?
Yes.
And President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 6C, bid results for the grant roof replacement. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Johnson.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation of the owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, to award the contract for roofing replacement at Grant Elementary to Royal Roofing Company, Inc., Lake Orion, Michigan, in the amount of $1,472,200 plus a 6% contingency in the amount of $88,332 for a total approved project amount of $1,560,532 and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mr. Centers. And Mr. Francis.
Thank you again. I'd like to just start off by saying that there is a typo in one of the numbers, but Mr. Johnson actually read the right amount into the record. So I appreciate the heck out of that. But it does say $1,472,000, and then we're missing a zero on that 200. You can barely notice it because there's a whole bunch of zeros right there. But it technically written incorrectly. I will fix that for what we upload into the system, but it was read appropriately. I was listening carefully, and it was read appropriately as I caught it.
It's already been fixed. It's correct on ours. It's been corrected already.
All right, strike what I just said.
Already.
If we can go backwards, that'd be great.
No problem.
I must have printed mine earlier than it got fixed.
I was not clairvoyant.
Okay.
On that.
Okay, I printed an older version. Appreciate it. So as we talked about last, or 2 weeks ago, I say, at the last meeting of the committee of the whole, we are looking to only do one project with regard to roofing for the summer of '22. This is out of the sinking fund. We have our 10-year district facility sinking fund plan that includes, amongst other things, new roofs across the district and our buildings. Grant has been determined to be in the worst condition of what we currently have, and we know that the market is a little out of whack right now, but weighing the pros and cons of waiting another year and what damage might occur with that roof versus what savings we might incur by waiting another year, we've determined, we took the other ones that were planned for off the table, but we do want to move forward with Grant's re-roofing in the summer of '22. So to catch Mr. Centers and Mr. Johnson up on a little of what we talked about at the committee of the whole, that is why there's only one on here, but we do recommend Royal has done work for us in the past, including this summer. They have produced quite well. We've been pleased with their work and recommend them to you again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comments or questions from the superintendent or members of the board? Mr. Centers?
Mr. Francis, you said that we've taken them off the board, but we kind of, as you said, this is a unique market. We anticipate going forward with those same projects probably the following year, correct?
That's correct. We've actually got them designed.
Yeah.
RTA has designed them. We sat in meetings, having conversations, my team, Plant Marion Cressa, the RTA team, talking about the market, what we think per square foot cost would be in this environment. And in the long run, they're all going to get done. A roof design now is perfectly fine, and we've done this before where we've had them designed, waited a following summer. So we actually are ahead on that, and we can put them on the street next year whenever we want because we got them ready.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions on this item? No. Seeing none, we have a motion for bid results for grant roof replacement by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mr. Centers. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Here, yes.
Yes, all right. Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
And Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. And President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. Thank you, folks. The next item on our agenda is item 6D, site work for Garfield Greenhouse. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton?
Mrs. Bonnefield.
I would love to make this recommendation. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District authorize the purchase of the required site work necessary for the Garfield Greenhouse to Universal Consolidated Enterprises, Inc., Roseville, Michigan, in the amount of $149,369.73, plus a contingency of $25,000 for a total project cost of $174,369.73.
Support.
We have a chorus of support. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by, I believe I heard Mrs. Acosta, and also Mrs. Jarvis, a lot of support in this. Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. We've discussed over quite some time the greenhouse at Garfield Community School. It is that joint project between Livonia Public Schools, the City of Livonia, and Healthy Livonia. This site work is the preparation, the foundational work, the hookups of stormwater, of different utilities, the excavation, the clearing of the site, etc. That is what this piece is. It will be coming from that special education budget. The district is putting in a portion, Healthy Livonia is putting in a portion, et cetera. So this bid went out. We did have 2 respondents, and the low responsible bidder is Universal Consolidated Enterprises. who does this type of general site work. That is what they're known for, and we do recommend them to the board. This is something that we're excited to continue on with. It hit a couple of speed bumps along the way, but we are now seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. The first thing that has to happen is this site work. We'll be taking delivery. We actually were communicating today with ClearSpan. GrowthSpan is the company we're getting the greenhouse from, and we're talking about delivery of it as I discussed at the committee of the whole. So it looks like the wheels are starting to roll.
Excellent. Comments and questions for our superintendent or board members? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Burton. Mr. Francis, I'm going to comment on the obvious, that the two bids were, like, the other bid from Nagel was more than twice.
It was, and we didn't know what the reasoning was. We inquired at the time of the committee meeting. We were making some guesses, but it turns out that Nagel had responded saying that they will subcontract much of the underground work, which raised their cost up quite a bit.
Okay.
That was the explanation that they gave us.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments or questions from the board? This is a very exciting project. This is, for those who may not be aware, this is a facility that we used to have at our former site. Now that this program has moved to Grant, this is a portion, the greenhouse is something that we have had our sights on replacing on this site, and just had a bit of, like you said, a few speed bumps getting it put in, but it's very exciting that we're looking at getting that going, and I know it's something that our students are really going to enjoy.
If you grant me a moment, I just
Absolutely,
want to
go right
say,
ahead.
because this has been, this is a very exciting item. It's something that's been a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of time. I wanted, before the board votes, just thank Mr. Harry Lau, the administrator of facilities operations, who has really put a yeoman's worth of work into getting this going with regard to procuring items. And I want to thank Dr. Jennifer Terriall, the director of student services, who's the one person from LPS who really was getting this ball rolling down that hill. She's our representative with Healthy Livonia, represents the Livonia Public Schools, so I want to thank both of them. I'm really the one that's just talking the board through it. They've gotten the spark going and the fire lit.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you to both those folks who are frequently, your work is before the board, so thank you so very much for all the work that you're doing. Any other comments or questions on this item? We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield for the site work for Garfield Greenhouse, supported by Mrs. Acosta. And Mrs. Bonifield, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 6E, HED change order approval. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Acosta.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve funds to pay a change order to HED in Southfield, Michigan for architectural services at the Central Office Administration Building in the amount of $9,511.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And I believe this is Mr. Francis again.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. HED was the architect for this Central Office Administration Building renovation. Their work began before the stated start time in their contract in the West Building. This is discussed in a little bit more detail at the Committee of the Whole. And the real meat of some of their work really came from once we started to take down the ceiling in that West Building. We found had unforeseen mechanical, electrical, plumbing issues. HED had to put in more hours of work. The dollar amount here was a negotiated number down from what their original billing hours were. So after the recognition of the additional time HED had to put in on the project that was outside of the scope of the original contract, and after the negotiation of some of those dollars down, we feel very comfortable accepting this change order and recommending it to the board.
Thank you. Comments or questions from the superintendent or board members? No? And if I remember correctly, there was once we opened up the ceilings. We found out that we could utilize some of that space there. So there were some of that came in because Livonia Public Schools made some change requests once we opened up those ceilings and walls and learned what was behind them.
Yeah, we had some
and
work.
what wasn't behind them.
Yeah, we had to do a little work, but it really turned out nicely because we had the capability, as you're mentioning, is actually we found extra ceiling space. There's 2 ceilings in that area. That building's 100 years old. We captured more window space, more natural light, and more ceiling height in that back area because of what we found under the first ceiling.
Which is why change orders
Technically,
exist.
I guess it's the second ceiling. It's the first one we dug into.
When you open up walls and ceilings and floors, inevitably there's something there that no one knew was there,
Yes.
or the absence of something that we didn't expect either. Any other comments or questions on this item? We have a motion for the HED change order approval by Mrs. Acosta, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton.
Yes, and that motion passes. I believe our noise in the hallway has stopped, so could anybody please prop those doors back open again? I would appreciate it. And if anybody is from our cabinet is left in the hall, just let them know that they don't have to stay out there any longer. Thank you, folks. The next item on our agenda is item 7, personnel matters, and 7A is teachers for approval. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and offer employment to the 2021-22 school year to the teachers listed on the attached document.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Centers. And we will hear from Mr. Abate and Mrs. Gates.
It's just me tonight.
All
Good
right.
evening, President
Good evening.
Burton. The prospective new staff members we are presenting to the board this evening have been selected to fill our needs in the areas of early childhood, special education, and social work. They are all well qualified to fill their respective positions and have been fully vetted through our extensive interview process. We are confident they will perform at a high level and represent LPS in a manner that is consistent with our shared vision and collective commitments. These positions have also been included in the 21-22 budget. We are pleased to be recommended these talented individuals to join our LPS family, and with your approval, we are excited to have them working with our students.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions from the superintendent or board members? And Mrs. Keats, typically we do most of our hiring over the summer, but inevitably we do have some that we are catching up throughout the year, and we also are seeing folks who, again, most of our folks who are leaving due to retirements or moving or whatever do so at the end of the school year, but that doesn't always happen. And I assume that's the case with these positions. We have them open mid-year, and therefore we're looking to fill mid-year.
That is correct. We have some retirements that have happened in November, taking effect now and through the end of the calendar year, as well as some folks who were on leave and deciding to remain on leave through the remainder of the year, thus necessitating posting a position.
Okay. And these, again, you stated already, but these are already in the budget.
They are in the budget, correct.
Okay, terrific, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Centers, for teachers for approval. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton.
Yes. And that motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 7B, teachers for tenure. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Johnson.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and acknowledge that tenure status has been granted to the following teachers effective on the respective date: Michelle Hostler, November 10th, 2021; Rebecca Perez, November 4th, 2021.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Acosta. Mrs. Keats.
Hello again.
Hello.
Our teachers for tenure on this agenda have successfully completed the district's requirements for probationary teachers, including years of service, evaluations, overall performance, and documentation of student growth. We have carefully reviewed all supporting materials along with the recommendations of our building administration and have determined that these educators should be granted tenure status with the Livonia Public Schools. We wish to congratulate these staff members for reaching this milestone and look forward to their continued success working in Livonia Public Schools.
Thank you. Comments or questions from our superintendent or board members? Absolutely. Congratulations on this accomplishment. We have a motion for teachers for tenure by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Acosta. And Mrs. Bonifield, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. The next item on our agenda, item 7C, is resignations, and that does not require a board vote, so that is just informational purposes only. Item 7D is retirements, and may I have a motion, please?
President Burke.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolution of appreciation for the services rendered by Ralph Chrysler, Rochelle Noel, Sally Roque, and David Russo.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis for retirements. Mrs. Keats.
Tonight, we honor and congratulate 4 members of our LPS family who are retiring from their positions with Livonia Public Schools. As these staff members leave the district, they take with them a combined total of 90.5 years of experience. On behalf of the administration, I would like to thank these wonderful staff members for the dedicated years of service they have provided to the students of LPS, and we ask the board to please adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for our retirees.
Thank you. Comments or questions by our superintendent or board members?
Just congratulations.
Really fantastic.
Absolutely, congratulations. It is not common in this day and time any longer to have folks staying so many years in one position or under one employer, and we frequently see that with Livonia Public Schools employees who are retiring with an enormous number of years. So we will definitely miss them and miss their historical knowledge as they are going out the door, but we wish them well in the next chapter of their lives. We have a motion for retirements by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mrs. Bonifield, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says, Mrs. Bonifield says yes, and President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. And congratulations. The next item on our agenda is item 8, hearing from board members, and 8A is the second reading and adoption of Board Policy JCAB, investigations and searches of individual students, lockers, and other personal property. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee and adopt board policy language per the attached document for Board Policy JCAB, investigations and searches of individual students, lockers, and other personal property.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers. And I believe this is Mr. Willenborg.
Thank you, President Burton.
Hello.
Hello. You may recall back in early October, we began discussion on this policy at the study session and then a committee of the whole meeting. And then we went through a first reading at the end of last month. This policy hit the 20-year mark, so we put it up for review. We had a committee to study it, an administrative committee to study it. And we found that it just needs some tweaking of the language. The legal concepts of search and seizure were intact, that school officials may not conduct unreasonable searches and seizures. However, I want to make clear, school officials have a right to search a student and their belongings and their vehicles based upon reasonable suspicion. The exception to the reasonable suspicion standard is with regards to school lockers. Lockers are school property, and students must have no expectation of privacy in their school lockers. I continue to recommend support of the revision of policy JCAB.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions from the superintendent or board members on this item? No. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Burton. I just want to thank Mr. Willenborg. I know this took a lot of work, as you're working on some other ones as well. These just don't happen overnight, and a lot of thought went into this, so on behalf of the board, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I would second what Mr. Johnson said. That we try to continue to look at our policies on an ongoing basis. Some are quite quick, and some are much meatier. This is one that Mr. Willenborg, even though, as you indicated, there was not a lot of substantive change in here, much at all, but the language needed to be cleaned up. Make sure that it was appropriate and current and so forth. So thank you very much. It is a very important policy, and it's important that it's clear and that it's well stated. So thank you very much for your work on it. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion then of the second reading and adoption of board policy JCAB, investigations and searches of individual students, lockers, and other personal property. Motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonifield, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta?
Yes.
And President Burton?
Yes, and that policy passes. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Mr. Willenborg.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item 8B, hearing from board members. Are there any board members who have anything that they wish to share this evening? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I just wanted to welcome everybody back after the Thanksgiving break and to wish a happy Hanukkah to those families in our community that are celebrating that right now.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you to all of you who have attended our meeting this evening or watched from home. We do appreciate our community's involvement in our school district. And I would like to thank again on behalf of the Board of Education, thank our school team, and that includes our parents and our community members, for continuing to do the very best that we can to educate our children in a very difficult COVID situation. We were really hoping that we are at the tail end of it right now, but Michigan, unfortunately, is not indicating that we are at the tail end. I sure hope that that's coming soon. But I do want to express our heartfelt thanks for all of our students, staff, parents, our community members, for doing the best that we can every single day for the students that are entrusted to our care. Thank you very much. Any other comments before we leave? Seeing none, we have reached the end of our agenda, and we are now adjourned. I wish you a nice evening. Good evening.